Firewatch is a game with a lot of reds, oranges, and yellows. But then you have something like Portal, and it's all blues and grays and whites. Safe to say that Firewatch has a very warm palette, and Portal has a very cool-toned one. As a result, the environment of Portal feels very corporate and sanitized. It's a similar thing that you see in games like Mirror's Edge or Superhot. These games all have clinical and cold undertones, both literally in terms of color palette, and in terms of the way that they resonate with you as a player emotionally. There's a reason for why color plays such an important role in that, but if we want to understand that, we have to look at the science of color, so buckle up, I'll make this fast. Color itself is just a wavelength of light. And as light travels around and does its thing, it's going to bounce on objects, and those objects are going to either absorb the light or reflect it. The reflected light is what color is. And then these little things called cones in our eyes are what's going to absorb that reflected light to actually see the color. Now, red is the reflection that has the longest wavelength, followed by orange, yellow, and Am I forgetting the colors of the rainbow? Orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. That's our good old friend, Roy G. Biv. That's literally why red is at the top of the rainbow and why violet is at the bottom. Red has the longest wavelength, it's gonna bend the least, and then purple's gonna bend the most. Longer wavelength colors, like those reds, oranges, and yellows that we see in Firewatch, they evoke stronger emotions psychologically, whereas shorter wavelengths make us react the least. The reason behind that is because our eyes have the most cones in them that are the most sensitive to longer wavelengths. They make you the most stimulated. That is why an explorative game like Firewatch might use them so heavily. It wants you to feel the awe and the excitement of exploring. Exploration is meant to have very powerful feelings, and warm colors are a great way to make that happen. I don't exactly have a source for this tidbit, but I would imagine that that's why sunsets and sunrises in video games hit so hard. They're all warm colors. And that's why games that maybe aren't meant to create feeling, or are perhaps meant to feel more corporate or unfeeling in their atmospheres, use cooler palettes. Because maybe the goal is apathy. They aren't trying to feel welcoming. Heck, cooler colors are actually harder for your eyes to look at for longer periods of time. That's why you've got like night mode on your PC that'll tint your screen warmer so that your eyes aren't as angry at it. But it's even cooler when you see games that use both a warm and a cool palette, and they use it to create some kind of narrative or manipulate your emotions. Like, look at Journey. At the beginning of this game, you're dropped into this beautiful, glowing golden desert. You're surfing the dunes, and those dunes are filled with yellows and reds and oranges. The sunlight is warm, the environment is open. But then, second half of the game, you start climbing this mountain, and all the glowing golden hues become blues and whites, and it feels a lot colder, literally and figuratively. The sand is now snow, and you're no longer gliding around having the time of your life, but you're fighting for your life against the wind. There's less of a sense of wonder and more of a sense of survival. That emotional shift doesn't come at all from dialogue or cutscenes. It comes from the environment, and it comes from color, from the transition from warm to cool. It hits really hard because when we started the game, we had those longer wavelength colors that gave us the stronger emotions, and then it was torn away from us. And you know what that reminds me of? The control over my private information online, which is why I think Incogni, today's sponsor. Hear me out. The internet starts the same way that Journey does. It's exciting, it's open, full of possibility, but the more you explore, the colder it gets, and you realize that these companies known as data brokers are gathering your private information and selling it to advertisers and scammers. Your name, your address, your social media, all of that gets used to build detailed profiles that often gets tossed into the hands of scammers. That's why you get a bunch of fraud emails and calls from random numbers trying to get your money. Now, Incogni is a service that stops that from happening because it's a data removal tool that automatically sends data removal requests to brokers on your behalf. I got my first speeding ticket a couple months ago, and coincidentally, in that same week, I also received a text saying, hey, you violated traffic laws and you have to go to this link to pay. Before Incogni was able to take my phone number off of these websites that these scammers were getting my information from, I would get these texts so much. But just like how the end of Journey fills with warm, welcoming colors again, the internet can too, with the help of Incogni. Go to incogni.com/juniperdev and use code juniperdev to get an exclusive 60% off an annual Incogni plan. Thank you, Incogni, for sponsoring, and let's get back to my nerdy color stuff. Needless to say, color can do a lot for a game emotionally, but it also can do a lot mechanically. This is Mirror's Edge. Now, if you look really closely, it's a little hard to see. There's this bright red pipe hiding somewhere. Sorry, right here. In this case, color is obviously being used to point you in the right direction. Mirror's Edge is this dystopian parkour game, and most of the platforms that you can land on or interact with in this game are very clearly highlighted red. It's never the question of, oh, can I interact with that? Can I land on that? Because if it's red, probably. Because this is a fast-paced platforming game, that means that the movement of the player is very rarely interrupted with the conscious question of where to go. And you can stay in that flow state for longer, even in a completely unfamiliar environment. Color is the defining path, and we process that as a signal way faster than we do words or symbols. Overwatch relies on color as a tool for the same reason, because the gameplay is so fast. Me, as a player, I need to understand when I'm being healed, or when I'm being hurt, or when I'm being told to go back to the kitchen in voice chat. There's a lot of multitasking needed here, and color makes it all so much easier. It makes it become less of a conscious thought and more of a reflex. We see green or yellow in a game, and we immediately recognize that's an ally, and then we see red, and obviously that's an enemy, that's a bad guy. That is a lightning-fast subconscious thought, which is a very powerful tool in game design. It's one of those silent things that you can expect the player to pick up on even without explicitly telling them. The fact you could start any game and most people could infer whether this person is going to try and kill you or not based on their color alone is very interesting. Because why is that the case? Why is red bad and green good? I went to the ends of the earth to try and find an answer for this. I emailed multiple professors from my university. I went to the second and the third page of Google, but the most scientific suggestion that I could find has to do with just how humans associate red with danger. The reason we most likely do is because red stands out the most against green, and green is the color of the Homo sapiens' natural open world environment. So that contrast between the environment and red is what makes it so jarring. Maybe a big color nerd in the comments can give me a bit better of an analysis on that, but obviously it also comes from the fact that blood is red, we have a lot of cultural connotations for red, stop signs, anger, there's a lot of things that perpetuate it as bad. But what's neat is that there's also a culture just like that surrounding color, but specific to video games. Color literacy, I would argue, is its own unique thing that goes far beyond the cultural definition of, oh, red bad, green good. Red is your health, blue is mana, green is, it's like we're on an episode of Dora, what's green? It's stamina. Orange means legendary rarity, purple means rare. Games have developed their own language for color that keeps getting reinforced by repetition. The more that you play games, the more you pick up on these color cues. You could drop a Diablo player in Fortnite who's never played it before, and they would still probably know that the orange gun is better than the blue gun. Fun fact, but Diablo actually is the first game to really popularize the idea of a color-coded loot system in 1996. Though it did take inspiration from this old ASCII game called Angband? That popularization and all the games after it really set the trend of, okay, white to green to blue to purple to orange to whatever possibly comes after that. And there's more variation generally at the higher levels. And it makes sense because white is a blank slate. It's like martial arts. You start with a white belt. And then blue and green are the same colors that you're going to see in nature, so they don't stand out as much in a natural game environment, which is pretty common. Purple, though, is not at all a part of the nature palette, so it stands out a lot. Orange then makes sense to be the highest rarity because it's the closest to gold. It's luxury, it's valuable, just like in real life. I love talking about this stuff because it's stuff that's like such a surface level observation, but if you've never thought about it before, it's really cool to think about. What's really cool though is when these systems of color literacy don't just tell you something about a game, but they then change the way that you interact with the game. For example, I just started playing my first Resident Evil game, and in this game there are two types of crates. There are wooden crates, and there are wooden crates. But can you tell which one the game wants you to destroy and there's a reason to destroy it? Or what about this? This is Cuphead that we're looking at. These pink recolors of enemies or objects indicate that you can actually parry them instead of taking damage from them if you hit them. And in a game that is as fast and hectic as Cuphead, especially with 2 people, oh my goodness, that color indication is all that you need to know what to do. You're going to change the way that you approach this interaction because of the color. There's a million examples of how color tells you what to do like this, and it herds you like the little sheep that you are. White walls in Portal mean that you can put a portal there, and if it's not white, you can assume that you can't put it there. Shiny Pokemon or pals in Pal World have that lovely little gleam on them to indicate that they're more valuable. Games that use color effectively do a great job at guiding your eye to the interactable things, while also not making it overwhelming or giving you too much to focus on. It's the same type of problem that you have to tackle in film when you're designing shots and environments for movies. Now, in film world, that process of making a visually pleasing shot in terms of color usually has to do with something called the 60-30-10 rule. Basically, 60% of your shot should be a dominant color, 30% should be a secondary color, and then 10% should be an accent color that's either complementing the other 2 colors or contrasting from it. It applies to not just film, but also interior design, website design, and, I would argue, game design. When we look at Mirror's Edge, or Superhot, or any game that very intentionally uses color and is kinda known for it, they tend to follow this 60-30-10 rule. In this little screenshot from Mirror's Edge, we have 60% white, 30% sky, blue, and then 10% yellow as the accent color. Any video game Horizon that looks nice is probably the same structure, even if the 10% is just browns or grays that maybe complement the environment. But what makes this so interesting and different compared to film is that in film, the director has full control over what is being shown to the viewer in every single shot. They can ensure that the 60-30-10 color balance is perfectly arranged because they know exactly what the viewer is going to see on their screen every second. But in a 3D video game, the player is the camera, and they can move anywhere and they can look anywhere. This gives the designer a really unique challenge because if they want to use this color principle, they have to do it in a way that is completely dynamic. They have to keep it up no matter where the player is going in the environment or where they're looking. That is what makes 3D games that do it right or emphasize color so well so impressive, because you're having to design for a complex, constantly changing space that is completely relevant to the position of a player. It is very obvious to me when games do it right, because those are the games that stand out for their use of color and how much they killed it. Look at Greece, look at Monument Valley, look at Astroneer. Screenshots from any one of those games feel like works of art, because they're using color to create these beautiful compositions that scratch all the right parts of everyone's brain. Well, unless you're colorblind, in which case, a loser. Just kidding, I'm not colorblind, but I do have visual snow syndrome, so I cannot see solid colors. Visual snow just means that my whole life is static. I can't see in the dark and I get migraines, basically. Little Juniper fun facts of the day for you. In this video, I would have loved to talk about games like Hue and Splatoon that use color as a mechanic, but that kind of is more on the color theory of side, and I wanted to keep this to more so the psychology. But if that is something that you'd want to see, then let me know. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye!